Abuse and suicide. Wow, today is a heavy topic. Welcome to the Joyous Expansion Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Dupree, scouring the globe to bring you stories of courage, passion, and resilience. If I could sum up this podcast into one word, I would use empathy. Now let's get inspired. Welcome to episode 25 of the Joyous Expansion Podcast. There I am, 25 episodes. It's like a quarter till 100. I am your host, Brett Dupree, here to welcome you to an awesome whatever day you are listening to this to right now. It's Wednesday, my 8th, and hopefully I'm going to get this out tonight because that's what I'm working on doing. I know, insider baseball for you. So today we have an interview with Mandi Dorrell. It's a very interesting interview. I'll get more on that later, but we talk about her struggles growing up that led to her issues with emotional abusive parents, so that's always fun, but how she now works in suicide prevention. Something I think is very important because suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. At least that's what Richard Bandler said. But the reality is once you kill yourself, you can't change. There is still hope if you're still alive. At least that's my motto. I don't know how helpful that is. Probably not too much. I don't really understand suicide because it's just not how my brain's wired. So I found this conversation to be very interesting. I have been living a good life so far. I'm going to be starting a new podcast soon, the Church of Awesome podcast, where I'll be really delving into the Church of Awesome. So watch out for that. It's going to be part of Seven Stones Radio, part of that network. Working on that. So excited about that prospect. Lightworker Toastmasters is going good. My time as the public relations manager for Toastmasters is going away soon, so that should give me a little bit more free time and less stress, though I'm still working towards my Distinguished Toastmaster my Distinguished Toastmaster Award. I need a high performance leadership module, and that's it. So I'm going to be really working on that soon. So yeah, that's pretty much catching up with my life. My full-time job is still around and still making me money. I have decided a lot to go back to basics and really work on making my life awesome, which is why I'm really putting the Church of Awesome into a thing. That's my new vision, and that's where I am living. So if you go on Facebook, Church of Awesome, we have a group I already got the domain, The Church of Awesome. Watch out for that website. It'll be with Joyous Expansion, of course, because I still want to increase joy as well as increase awesome. Joy and awesome. That's why I say be love, be joy, be awesome. That's all three, my friends. Well, now it's time for the 5th commandment of the Church of Awesome. Remember, number 1 being be awesome. Beginning with the end in mind and work towards your goals. Number 2 is treat yourself awesome. How you treat yourself is very important, and the reason why it's number 2 is because it circumvents all other ones that come after it, because number 3 is have an awesome mindset. So that's a way to treat yourself awesome, is to work on your mindset. And number 4 is treat other people awesome, which is important, which is why number 2 circumvents it, because you want to treat yourself awesome before you treat everyone else. But you got to take care of yourself first and not martyr yourself out there. But at the same time, a rising tide raises all ships. And if we treat each other awesome, everything is great. The 5th commandment of the Church of Awesome is be friends with failure. Yes. Friends with failure. Success is not guaranteed, but if you are committed to your success, you increase your chances of succeeding. And the way you do that is become friends with failure. In fact, I believe this is one of my most important. The reason why this is the 5th commandment, because this is the one that I need to work on the most. Failure has not been my friend because I have not developed a mindset, treated myself awesome, and treated others awesome when it comes to my personal failures, the stresses I put on myself. And when I would fail in the past, I would take it hard. And if things didn't go the way I wanted to, in fact, if you've been listening to multiple of my podcasts, you have heard me talk about how the fact that this podcast isn't as big as I would like. And the thing is, I don't have astrological numbers in mind. I was just hoping for 10 to 20. I get 10 views per podcast. I was hoping for 25 to maybe 100. I don't know. But at least 25 views per podcast, or at least see a growing number. But things are just kind of staying about the same. And there's a part of me that is just, that kind of wears on me. But if I were to truly live that part of awesome, being friends with failure would allow me to keep on pushing forward, learning how to improve, getting new ideas, because, number 3 is having a awesome mindset. So instead of looking at the fact that I do not have as many listeners as I want, asking myself, okay, how can we get more listeners? Because in reality, if you try and try and try and try, a lot of times you will fail. A lot of times you will not get the results that you want. But if you look at them as learning opportunities, then you'll be able to move forward. Being able to move forward is the key to living a successful life. And this one is so big, maybe it's just very big for me. If you have the mindset down where you can be friends with failure, you can be friends with messing up, and looking life as a learning opportunity and having a growth mindset instead of a mindset of problems, that you will increase your chances of living the life of your dreams, of living the life that you want to live. Because life is full of failure. No matter how many times you're going to raise your vibration up to a higher plane, something you try is just not going to work out. But once you are tied to that, in fact, this is almost the Buddhist idea of suffering, letting go of desire. Letting go of your desires would be a part of being friends with failure. Letting go of the desire for what you want. And being friends and be able to accept what happens in your life. So this may be more of a personal commandment of mine, but I think it is very important, at least for a certain percentage of us, to emphasize being friends with failure and continue to move forward. And speaking of being friends with failure, today's interview is not the best quality, but the subject matter is so important, I really want to share it out there. To be honest, when I first got done with the interview, due to the things that went wrong, the failures, if you will, I actually felt down upon it. But now that I've actually listened to it and edited it, Mandi was extremely vulnerable in her sharings, and I love the interview, even though the quality is not up to what I'd like it to be in the audio quality, not the quality of the interview. Interview is amazing, the audio quality. So I apologize for that, but information is so important that needs to put out there. So I ask you, my honored listener, to endure the unfortunate quality of the audio on her end, because the information is so good. And because my internet actually went down during this interview, and at one point, the last 10 minutes or so, some parts she's sped up because of this. Something happened with Zencaster.com, and it's just, so she's going to be talking really fast, and some parts are kind of hard to understand, which is unfortunate because some of those parts are very important. But honestly, I think suicide prevention is just a very important topic, and so I hope you enjoy this interview. Mandi Dorrell has been a teacher and adjunct professor for 10 years and the program director of a suicide prevention nonprofit. Growing up in a verbally abusive household and spending most of her life people-pleasing, she recently learned ways to give of herself while still honoring her own needs and wants. Now she tries to live every day to the fullest and take every experience with gratitude. Hello, Mandi, and welcome to my podcast.
Thank you.
Looking over your bio, you seem to have a very interesting life.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I wouldn't say super interesting, but a lot of different things have happened. I've taken a lot of different paths throughout my life.
You said you were in a part of a verbally abusive household growing up?
Yes, I was. My parents had 5 kids, and they were pretty avoidant emotionally from all of us, but they selected myself and my brother to be verbally abusive towards. Growing up, I was responsible for a lot in my house because I was an older child. With that, no matter what I did, I couldn't do it right. And a lot of negative feedback about my personality, about things I did wrong. Just everything I did, or even just being present, was sort of an insult to my parents. And they made that very clear to me. Eventually, I just shut down and ignored everything they were saying. and didn't respond to their discipline, didn't respond to anything they said. And because of that, they then pulled me into their bedroom and told me something was very wrong with me, that I needed to go to a mental hospital, which I asked why. I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with me. And they said, because you don't listen to us. And I said, if I listen to you, do I have to go to the hospital? And they said, no. So then it became abuse in a manipulative way. It became, if I wasn't doing what they needed, there was always that threat dangling over me. So not a safe environment in any capacity.
Ooh, that does not sound good at all.
No.
That must have led to some serious issues growing up.
It did. It created in me definitely anxiety and depression. I didn't know I had anxiety and depression my whole life until I became an adult and went off to college. It made me very distrusting of mentors and parents, my friends' parents, other people's parents, my own parents, but I never felt comfortable getting close to an adult. And that also led me into obsessive compulsive disorder, because when you live in a situation you can't control, you look for something you can control. So in my way, it came out as OCD. I've also had a series of both relationships and friendships that have been the recycling of my parents' interaction with me, not the verbal abuse by any means in my adult relationships, but just the essence that you don't belong here and we don't want you here. I've had that happen to me repeatedly. And once something starts coming up in your life, those patterns are repeated until they're healed.
So you said you didn't discover you had anxiety and depression until you were in college. How did you discover that?
So when I went off to college, I had always been very independent and self-sufficient. When I went off to college, it wasn't that I was alone for the first time. It was that I was now responsible for everything in my life. So even though my parents were abusive, they still fed us, they still clothed us. I always had a roof over my head. Now it was on me to figure it all out. I didn't know how to begin college, how the admissions process worked. I didn't know what to do about a meal plan. So all of this newfound responsibility, in addition to doing something I wasn't even sure about. I didn't know if I wanted to go to college. I was just doing what everyone else did. And so with that, my roommate could see, she's a super kind human being. She could see that I was off. So she recommended I go to the wellness center, and I did. And I met a few times with a psychologist there, and she diagnosed me with generalized anxiety disorder and situational depression. So from that time, I've been re-diagnosed with that multiple times, but in every situation, I work harder at staying stable emotionally. But every one of my therapists has told me, this is in my brain. This is now part of who I am. It's not situational, and your brain alters when you have depression, and my brain has stayed in that altered state because of the way I was raised. Unfortunately, I'm on medication the rest of my life. However, it does help keep me balanced, and it does for the brain what the brain cannot do for itself. So although this wasn't something I caused, it's still something I live with.
Did they explain to you how your brain actually changes?
There's receptors, there's neuron connectors. I don't know where they are in the brain. Forgive me for that. The neuron receptors take the serotonin and move it to other areas of your brain. So, serotonin is that feel-good feeling. And when you have depression, clinical depression, that serotonin cannot move on its own. There's a blocker in the receptor, and so you never get that kind of full light feeling that you can feel on a really good day. That doesn't exist. So the medication that I'm on is one of what are called SSRIs, and they move the serotonin for the brain. So they get rid of that blocker and allow it to move freely.
Oh, cool. So you can totally see a difference between when you take the medication and when you don't take the medication.
Absolutely. I highly recommend medication for depression for adults. So I just want to put a little side note in there. There aren't enough studies and evidence to show what the dangers and risks are for children. For adults, if you have depression, I would recommend speaking to someone about medication.
So you're going through your adult life and you've received your medication and anxiety. What did you do after that to work through your OCD and issues?
One of the things that can happen sometimes with people on medication is we expect medication to be the fix for the problem. You pop a pill and everything goes away. So I did spend a couple of years in that kind of headspace. So I would take my medication, but I was not regularly at that time attending therapy. I wasn't doing anything to work on myself. So there was a flat feeling, which I enjoyed because it was better than crying for hours for no reason. But there were issues in my relationships with others and myself, and I couldn't quite figure out what was causing them. And it ended up that I had to get divorced because I had married someone who was not right for me, who I just married because that was also something you were supposed to do. So once I got divorced, I recognized, okay, there's something that I'm not hitting that I need to be hitting with myself. So I started going to therapy. I talked about getting divorced, and the therapist that I met then and still have taught me the truth. And the truth is that you can't do medication alone. You have to have therapy. And with good therapy, you're willing to break down really painful walls. You're willing to go into spaces that make you super uncomfortable, and you're going to move through them. With having medication, with finally attending therapy, I was taken into spaces in myself that I would never want to visit again. Therapy is not fun, and it's not supposed to be fun. But going to therapy makes it so that every time you deal with something painful, it's a way to make you grow. It's not repeated trauma coming back up over and over again. It's a trauma recognition. It's a skill to move past it, and it's a way to become a better, happier human. So while my medication was doing a great job on its own, it did an exponentially better job in conjunction with therapy. So I lived like that for a few years, really got into a great rhythm. And then one of my very good friends died from breast cancer in December 2017. When she died from breast cancer, I just went into this massive grief. Death hurts whether you know it's coming or not. In this massive grief, I couldn't get myself out of it. And 3 months into grieving her, my relationships were deteriorating. It's always a good barometer for me to know how my relationships are doing with how my mental health is doing. They go hand in hand. And I spoke with one of my friends at work who could see that things were going on with me. And she recommended I go to a little bit more of an intensive therapy than what I was going to. I live near Philadelphia, so I went to the UPenn Center for the Treatment and Study of Anxiety, and I met with a therapist with a doctorate, and she was working specifically for patients with anxiety, and it was in this assessment period that I was diagnosed with OCD. I didn't know I had an OCD diagnosis until March of 2018, so it's been just about a year that I've been aware of this. Knowing about OCD and knowing how to treat it has, again, made my life so much better. So I've gone from just starting medication to being stuck and into these patterns that came from childhood to leveling up and learning a little bit more about myself and becoming more aware to a place where I can be at peace day in and day out, regardless of what's going on around me.
One of my favorite cartoons growing up was G.I. Joe, and I always remember at the end, they always do some fun little lesson for the kids, and their message was always, knowing is half the battle.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
But at the same time, that is very helpful. Having awareness of an issue allows you to do something with it rather than it being kind of this nebulous problem. Gives it form.
A lot of people don't go to therapy because they don't know something's wrong. So I don't want to invalidate the fact that there are things that happen in our life that create this sense of awareness. You have to go through something difficult to know where you are in terms of where you want to be. But I believe that there are a lot of people who are just kind of coasting along, and I don't think it's their fault. I think it's that we're not raised in a culture that promotes self-awareness.
We're also raised in a culture that kind of celebrates the idea of getting over something on your own rather than asking for help.
Oh, absolutely. And especially for anyone older than 25, I would say. We've all been taught to be resilient, to stand on our own 2 feet. And now we've got a whole bunch of kids that are coming in that only ask for help 24/7. It's definitely taken a swing.
I always find it funny because the saying of pick yourself up by your bootstraps actually exists because you can't pick yourself up by whatever your shoelaces or whatever they are would be in today because we don't have bootstraps.
Ah, I like that. That's a very good point.
So one thing that you mentioned and I don't say way earlier, but earlier was you kept on doing things because that's what you were supposed to do.
Yeah, so with being someone who was raised in a pretty emotionally abusive and neglectful household, I had no guides. So my mother and father never taught me how to do anything. Kids learn how to make their bed and how to brush their teeth, and girls learn how to do, or maybe boys too, I guess, learn how to do their hair. They teach you how to navigate friendships, what to do when you hit puberty. My parents never taught me any of that. They didn't care about teaching me that. They didn't want to. So the little that I knew, I learned on my own. And what I learned was there are ways you can make adults pay attention to you. My parents didn't pay any attention to me, so I had to find the adults that would, the ones that I trusted that would pay attention. And one of the people that paid attention to me and valued me was my librarian in elementary school. She pulled me out of class one day in 5th grade and said, "Hey, would you like to help me out in the library?" Well, I wanted to please this adult that I liked, so I said yes. And I helped her out in the library every week. And while that just isn't a regular, I guess, 5th grade job, I was being fed information that told me what I was doing was a good thing. So I volunteered in the library in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And then I volunteered in the library all through high school. And then I worked in the library through college. And then I got my library degree. Looking back on all that now, with the information that I had growing up, I had based my entire career on pleasing people. I had learned do what you have to do so you feel safe and so people around you are happy with you. So along with that, was getting married. My brothers had all gotten married, and I'd grown up with the message that even if marriage isn't great, you're supposed to be in a marriage. Between those two things, I had still been going along with what I was supposed to do, and that's right around the time that my friend died and I started OCD treatment. I've now woken up to the idea that, wait, why am I living life for somebody else? I should be doing what I want to do.
And how was that transformation of doing what you want to do?
So I'll tell you that when you are someone that has done what everybody else wants you to do for years, and then you decide you're going to start doing what you want, people don't like that. No one likes change, especially if you're a people pleaser. People are very happy with people pleasers because they do what they want them to do. So going from being a people pleaser to a non-people pleaser has left a lot of people shaken in my life. So there have been some painful experiences. I have lost more relationships, but the upside is knowing what I want to do and staying focused on my actual goals rather than what I was told or decided my goals were has made me even so much happier than I was last year getting diagnosed and getting treated. Because now I'm surrounding myself with things I care about that bring me happiness and validation. I'm sharing that with the world around me, and I'm sharing it now with new relationships and new friendships with people that honor that and don't want you to be a people pleaser. So the place I spend the most time besides my house and work is at my friend's yoga studio, Homegrown Yoga. She is a fairly new friend. I've known her for about 10 years, but we've been friends for 3. And going into her studio, everyone feels safe there because you walk in as you are and no one expects you to do anything other than your own path that day. So if you've ever taken or seen a yoga class, the instructor guides you through movements. What our instructors tell you is the movements are just a suggestion that you move how your body wants you to move today. And that's your purpose for being here. And that relates directly to kind of the new mindset I have in life, and that it might not work for somebody else, or it might not be what I need to be doing at this moment, but it's what I want to do right now. It's a brand new part of my life, and I am so happy for it.
Congratulations. That's so cool.
Thank you.
In our previous conversation, it seems like a huge part of your passion is working with children.
It is. And while I don't love being a librarian, I've had the pleasure of working in the school system for 10 years. I used to work with high schoolers, and now I work with kindergarten, first and second grade, middle school, and I teach college. My research shows that you're considered a child until age 25. So I consider all of them children. I call them my kids. And children I like to give children what I didn't have growing up. So I want children to feel validated and valued. I want them to know they're heard. I want them to know they belong. I really have a good relationship with pretty much all of my students because I respect them for who they are and what they bring to the table. It does not mean there's not rules. I'm very good at boundaries and making sure the students know what the rules are, and I do enact discipline. But even if I have to give a kid a consequence for a bad behavior, there's no relationship between that consequence and how I'll treat them in the very next moment. So they know that they're always safe in my presence. And every child I meet and see, I have this energy around me that makes me just want to reach out to them and tell them that they are fine the way they are. I did it today. I went to Starbucks, and this little girl took a little time away and stood next to me and was watching me, and I was watching her, and I asked her what she got for breakfast, and she told me, but you could tell she wanted to share. So I just innately go toward what the children are doing and engage with them, and I don't see that as a bad thing. It's a really fun part of being a teacher.
That does sound like a fun part. Going over your profile, you said that not all your times were good teachers because you've lost 6 kids to suicide?
I have lost 6 students, yeah, all when I taught high school. Our first student we lost in August 2014, and our last student we lost in June of 2016. I think 2016, but it was within a very short span there. When you are a teacher, well, I guess any teacher has relationships with most students in the building, even the students that aren't theirs. But when you have a child that you've lost to suicide that you used to teach, it's extremely devastating because we do see these children as our own in some ways. And a lot of these suicides actually happened over the summertime, which is even more devastating because it gave us the impression and the feeling that we were part of the reason the kids were alive. And without us in their lives, they gave up in some way. So we take responsibility for that. And I know that that's survivor's guilt, but it still exists. Just losing student after student after student. And then finally with our 6th one, I just couldn't take it anymore. I said, I don't want to lose another kid to suicide. So because of that, one of the parents of one of the children we lost to suicide, her mother wanted to start a foundation, a nonprofit for suicide prevention and education within schools. As soon as I lost my 6th student, I latched on to her and joined her cause. She started a foundation called Spread the Love Foundation, which is going into schools and training adults on suicide prevention and training kids on suicide prevention and doing mental health screenings, which is when you know if you might be developing a mental illness, and just teaching kids about coping techniques, stress relievers, who to reach out to when you need help, all the things that kids need today, because suicide is actually growing in the 10 to 24 population. It's the second leading cause of death. When I was growing up, it was the third leading cause of death. So there is an increase. There is a need for suicide prevention education in schools. And while I am devastated by the 6 students that I've lost, since bringing this foundation into that particular school system 3 years ago, there has not been one suicide since. So it's really made a huge difference in the lives of students in that area, and in other areas we're going, and we're seeing positive feedback as well.
That's great results.
Yeah, we're thrilled.
So how do you go about preventing suicides?
Well, suicide prevention is not the issue with suicide prevention is, first, people don't talk about suicide, or we see it as the exception to the rule. It's not likely to happen to us, it might happen to someone else. And the second issue is people think that only therapists can prevent suicide, but the truth is everyone can and should be responsible for preventing suicide. What it all comes down to, without giving you the training, is there's a lot of communication between the person who is suicidal and their friends and their family, communication with friends and the family. And the more people involved in a person's life communicating with that person, the more likely you will be to figure out if there's signs of suicidality. We often think of the suicidal person as a loner with no friends, wearing black clothing, maybe having their hood down, not showering, not taking care of themselves. And while that may be the case about someone who is very depressed, most suicidal individuals present and socialize very normally, but they give you hints. So those hints might be verbal, like saying, take my favorite sweater, or you won't have to worry about me after Monday. Those could be behavioral, like seeing them give things away or stop working on homework. And just among that, there's hundreds of other clues, but training individuals to know that anyone can prevent suicide is how we keep suicide from happening. People that are asked about suicide, about their own suicidal thinking, and asked to stop suicide often don't ever commit suicide. They want to know somebody's listening and someone cares. But if we're not talking to each other and we're not engaging in relationships and really getting to people around us, we might miss a sign. So it's all about that community engagement.
It's nice to know that there's something that we can actually do about it. It's not some nebulous thing that's just happening through education and getting people involved, that we can reduce suicides as hopeful.
Yeah, very helpful. And the truth of the matter is, we've been able to do something about it our whole lives, but many people don't know that they can. And there's also many organizations that won't. For example, the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco is the #1 bridge in the US for suicide. More people die off this bridge than any other bridge in the US. You would think that San Francisco or neighboring communities would put suicide prevention signs on the bridge, or they would put some sort of netting up, or they would have a mental health person sit on the bridge. There are tons of solutions that could come into place. The truth is, they haven't done anything about it, ever. So despite the fact they've consistently #1 for suicides, they've yet to follow through on a proposed solution. Even those that can often don't, which is why the statistics are so high.
Yeah, I remember reading an article, I believe it was Japan, that just changed the lighting in their subways to blue, and that dramatically reduced the amount of people who commit suicide via jumping in front of trains and subways.
Wow, I did not know that. I'll have to look that article up. That sounds cool.
So we're getting to the end of our interview, and one thing that I like to ask my interviewees to do is to give a 1 minute of motivation, something along the lines of, you have a time machine and you go back in time to your 8-year-old self, but you only have 1 minute to convey the information that could change their life forever, or basically condense your main message down to a minute.
Yeah, so overall, I would say to myself and to other people that you and what you want to do matters. Other people's opinions don't matter. As a child, we don't have much control over our situations, but as adults, we have full control. And if we are feeling blocked or stuck in some way, or something's not working, getting help or figuring out what's going on is the #1 way to get unstuck. Don't be afraid of the pain. Don't be afraid of the unlayering. What comes out underneath all of that is just a better, more whole version of yourself. I encourage anyone that needs therapy or any outside support to go find it, and to be willing to go and dig deeper to make it out on the other side in a much happier way.
Awesome. Thank you, Mandi, for coming on to my podcast. I really enjoyed your story of how you gone through so many relatable things as a child. Well, I say relatable because I also have abandonment and some issues, and my mom especially, had a very abusive father and an emotionally abusive mother for the most part. And hearing how you got help to get through it is very helpful for me, and I'm sure for many of my listeners. And your work upon reducing the suicides in your local area and beyond is very commendable. So I thank you for coming on my podcast, and thank you for your service to this world.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Hope you have a fabulous day.
Thank you. You too.
And there you have it, folks. That is the interview with Mandi Dorrell. Talk about What a story, and I really thank her for all the awesome things that they shared. Suicide is a very important topic, and something that she's right, we don't discuss enough in our society. In fact, May is Mental Health Month. One of the ways we are celebrating is, I believe there's a hashtag Stop Suicide. And so if you listen to this, definitely share out this podcast and the information on Mandi Dorrell. If you want to follow more of her, you can follow her on Instagram at The Messy Ohm, OHM. Also, if you want more information about suicide prevention programs, check out www.yourzenself.com. Yeah, listening to that interview, talk about being friends with failure, thinking about how I didn't do the best job of following up on how her background informs her desires and ways to relate to the children that she works with. One thing I know about people, at least something I'm noticing about people who have gone through things like that, is that then they want to help other people as well. People who have gone through struggles, at least on my podcast, have come out as ways to utilize those struggles to help people. One of my old teacher, Satya and Raja, would say it was a way to make music out of your kinks, and your kinks would be the things that hurt you in the past, not sexual kinks, but something along the lines, make music out of your pain, and the way you serve people is how you do that. And it's awesome that Mandi Dorrell was able to take her verbal abusive household and her people pleasing and turn it in a way to being people serving and creating a program to help save children's lives. And I am sure that even if her program didn't prevent a suicide, I don't mean prevent a suicide, I mean it probably did prevent a suicide, but I'm saying that even for someone who wasn't suicidal, but that the program caused someone to reach out to, that person probably needed that pick-me-up. I know for myself, I've never been suicidal. I have been unhappy. I spent a lot of time unhappy. And I know, especially during my high school years. And it would have been nice if someone reached out back then. I think that would have been very beneficial to me. Also, it's very easy to be smiling and unhappy. I've learned that in the last, 3 years. I haven't been the happiest person, but I've been joyful, if you will. Or I've just been anxious and joyful. A combination that I didn't know that was possible. But that's what you learn when you go through personal development. There's all new ways to mess up yourself in all exciting ways. But I really did enjoy that interview with Mandi. I am very thankful for what she shared, and hopefully that you got something out of it. And if you did get something out of it, I would love to hear from you. You can email me at BRE2Ts at joyousexpansion.com. You can also follow me on Facebook at Facebook Increase Your Joy. And I'm also on Instagram at Joyous Expansion, and I am on Twitter at Joyous Expansion, and my website is www.joyousexpansion.com. There I also have a free ebook for you. Wouldn't that be cool if you can download it? If you like this podcast, go to pod.joyousexpansion.com for more of them. Also, I believe I'm available on Stitcher, iTunes, anywhere where you can put up a podcast for free. So I'm not on iHeartRadio. Ha ha ha. This is Brett Dupree wishing you a wonderful whatever day you are listening to. I am truly grateful that you listen to my podcast. I'm truly grateful that you exist. And I love the fact that just by listening to this podcast, I know you are someone who wants to make this world a better place. And because of that, I appreciate you for who you are. I love you for who you are. And once again, I remind you, I, Brett Dupree, champion of authentic joy, catalyst of transformation, supreme guru poobah of the Church of Awesome, wishes you to be love, to be joy, to be awesome. Now play my jingle.
JoyousExpansion.com. JoyousExpansion.com. Come and say hello to Brett Dupree. He is an inspirational life coach. Good for you and good for me. He turned my life from grey to blue. I'm sure he'll do the same for you. Get in touch and you'll see your life will change dramatically. JoyousExpansion.com. JoyousExpansion.com. Yeah.